My name is Henry Dalton, and I've spent the better part of 49 years building a life I thought was worth living for. I started my own real estate development company from the ground up in Charleston, South Carolina. I remember the early days, working out of a cramped office, using my old beat-up truck to get from one project to the next. There were times I thought I'd never make it, but eventually the hard work paid off. My company grew, and with it, my sense of security. I married Emily when I was 31. We had 2 kids, Sophie and Noah, and for a long time I believed that I had everything I wanted in life, a successful business, a loving wife, and a family I could be proud of. I never really paid attention to the small things, the subtle changes in our routine. Emily, she always seemed happy, always supportive of my long hours and late nights, the sacrifice it took to make sure our family had everything it needed. She was my rock, the one constant in a world full of uncertainties. I never questioned her. I never thought I needed to. I trusted her, believed that the love we built our life on was real. But everything changed that Thursday afternoon. I was driving past a property I'd recently acquired for a new project when I decided to stop by and check on it. The project was taking longer than expected, and I wanted to make sure everything was on track. The property was a little rundown, a few broken windows, but with potential. I had high hopes for it. As I neared the gate, though, my heart sank. There, parked in the driveway of a house that wasn't mine, was Emily's Audi A6, the one I'd bought for her just a few months ago. She had promised me it would be in the garage when I got home that evening. But there it was, sitting in front of this property, parked next to a house that didn't belong to her. Something about that sight made my stomach drop, a knot forming in the pit of my stomach. I pulled off the road and parked across the street, my mind racing. I'd called her earlier that day and she'd told me she was at work, at her law office. Why was her car here? My gut told me something wasn't right. I tried to calm myself, telling myself it was probably nothing. Maybe she was just visiting a friend or had come to look at the property for some reason. But something felt off, like an alarm going off in the back of my mind. I sat in the car for a few moments, breathing deeply, trying to steady my nerves. When I finally opened the door and stepped out, I moved cautiously toward the house. I didn't want to draw attention to myself. The curtains were slightly parted, and I could just make out movement inside. My heart was pounding in my chest, each step feeling heavier than the last. I stopped when I heard voices coming from inside the house. At first I couldn't make out what they were saying, but as I crept closer, I recognized Chris's voice, the voice of Emily's brother and my business partner for the last decade. "We just need to get him to sign the papers, and then we'll have access to everything," Chris said, his voice low but clear. I froze, my blood running cold. What papers? What was he talking about? I moved closer, trying to peer inside without being seen, my mind racing. Emily was supposed to be at work today. I didn't understand why she was here with Chris. My confusion deepened when I heard her voice, soft but cold. "I'll handle the rest. You know he trusts me. Once he signs the divorce papers, everything will be mine. Our company, the house, all the investments. We'll be free to do whatever we want." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Divorce papers? What was she talking about? It couldn't be. I had to be hearing things. My world tilted on its axis as I stood there in disbelief. Emily, my wife, was planning to divorce me, to take everything we had built together. She was planning to take the company, the house, our investments, everything. I was frozen in place, barely able to breathe. My mind was a whirlwind of confusion and anger. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, listening to her laugh. An unfamiliar sound, one that once brought me warmth but now sent chills down my spine. "I'm so good at this," she continued, her voice dripping with contempt. The whole time he thought I was his loyal wife, but it was always a game. I've been playing him all along. I could hardly believe my ears. The woman I had loved for so long, the mother of my children, was planning to steal everything I had worked for. And my own brother-in-law, Chris, the man I had trusted with half of my business, was in on it. They had been planning my downfall for months. Every moment of trust, every sacrifice I made, had been a lie. It felt like I was suffocating, my heart racing with a mix of shock and disbelief. I stepped back slowly, trying to process what had just happened. My world had just shattered, and I didn't know how to put the pieces back together. How had I not seen this coming? How had they hidden their true intentions for so long? I wanted to scream, to lash out, but I knew that wouldn't solve anything. I had to be smart. I had to think clearly, plan and act. I walked back to my car, my mind spinning with anger and betrayal. I couldn't face them, at least not yet. I needed time to figure this out, to come up with a plan. One thing was clear. I wasn't going to let Emily and Chris take everything from me. They thought they had everything under control, but they didn't know who they were dealing with. I had spent years building a business, a life, and I wasn't about to let them destroy it without a fight. I sat in my car, hands gripping the steering wheel, the engine still running. My mind was made up. I would fight for everything they tried to take from me. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. In the days that followed, I couldn't escape the feeling of betrayal that lingered in the pit of my stomach. The more I replayed that conversation in my head, the more I realized how deeply I had been deceived. Emily and Chris had spent months planning behind my back, orchestrating the destruction of everything I had worked for. My first instinct was to confront them immediately, to demand answers, but I knew that would only play into their hands. I had to stay calm. I had to think strategically. I couldn't believe that Emily, the woman I had trusted with my heart and my business, was capable of something like this. For so many years I had been the one supporting her dreams, providing her with everything she wanted. She had always told me that we were in this together, that we were partners. It felt like a cruel joke now, but I wasn't going to let them get away with it. I spent the next few days gathering everything I could to protect myself. I went through our financial records, carefully reviewing our joint accounts, properties, and business investments. Emily had always managed the household finances, but I knew enough to recognize the potential danger. I called in some trusted contacts from my business, including my accountant, Jack Williams, who had helped me navigate tricky situations in the past. I told him everything, about the betrayal, the plans for the divorce, and how Emily and Chris had been secretly gathering information on my assets. Jack was furious when I explained what was happening. He knew both Emily and Chris, and his loyalty was with me. He promised he'd help me put together a plan to secure my business and personal finances. Together, we began taking steps to protect everything I had worked for. We froze joint accounts, reviewed the company's ownership structure, and made sure any assets I owned were legally protected. Jack also helped me prepare for a potential court battle, advising me on the legal steps I needed to take to shield myself from any future claims. But I knew that wouldn't be enough. I needed evidence. Emily and Chris thought they were one step ahead of me, but they had no idea how thoroughly I was preparing to fight back. I hired a private investigator, Mike Roberts, to track their movements and gather information on their activities. I wanted to make sure they weren't making any more moves behind my back, and I needed proof of their conspiracy. Mike quickly got to work, shadowing Emily and Chris. He reported back to me almost daily, filling me in on their meetings and phone calls. It was clear that they had no idea I was on to them. They continued their plans, thinking I was too naive or distracted to notice. But every step they took only brought me closer to my goal. The more I learned, the more disgusted I became. Emily had been playing me for years, pretending to be a loving wife while secretly plotting her escape. Chris, her own brother, was complicit in the scheme. I couldn't afford to let my emotions take over, no matter how much I wanted to confront them. I needed to be calm, to make sure I had everything in place before I made my next move. The last thing I wanted was to act impulsively and ruin my chances of protecting my business and my future. One evening, after Mike had reported back with more details about their activities, I sat down in my office and reviewed everything I had. I had audio recordings from Chris's conversations, photos of Emily and Chris meeting, and bank statements showing evidence of Emily's unauthorized transfers. My heart raced as I thought about the evidence I had accumulated. Emily and Chris had underestimated me. They thought I was a fool, but I was about to show them just how wrong they were. I took the next few days to prepare for the confrontation. I knew it wouldn't be easy. Emily was my wife, and Chris was like a brother to me. but they had crossed a line, and I couldn't let them destroy everything I had worked so hard for. I called Jack and told him I was ready to move forward. He agreed to be present for the confrontation, as a legal witness in case things got ugly. The night before I planned to confront them, I felt a strange calmness wash over me. It wasn't the calm of someone who had made peace with the situation, but the calm of someone who was prepared. I had already accepted the fact that my life, as I knew it, was over. The family I had once known was gone, replaced by lies, greed, and betrayal. But I wasn't going to let them take everything from me without a fight. I had worked too hard, sacrificed too much. This was my moment to take control back. The next afternoon, I drove to the house, feeling the weight of what was about to happen. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, my mind racing with thoughts of what I would say, how they would react. I pulled into the driveway, took a deep breath, and stepped out of the car. When I walked through the door, Emily was sitting in the living room, as expected. Chris was there too, lounging on the couch, as if nothing had happened. Their faces were filled with surprise when they saw me standing in the doorway. Emily stood up, her expression changing from shock to something more guarded. "What's going on, Henry?" she asked, her voice tinged with suspicion. I walked toward them, my heart steady but my emotions still raw. "I know everything," I said flatly. "I know about the divorce, the plans to take everything, and I'm not going to let it happen." Chris's eyes widened for a moment, but he quickly regained his composure. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, his voice calm but laced with nervous energy. I didn't give them a chance to continue their lies. "I've already spoken to my lawyer," I said, pulling out the documents I had prepared. "I've got the evidence, the bank statements, the recordings, the photos. It's all here. You've been planning this for months, and now I'm going to make sure you don't get away with it." Emily's face paled, and for the first time in a long time, I saw fear in her eyes. "Henry, you don't understand," she said, her voice shaky. "This is just the only way for me to—" "No, Emily," I cut her off. "This is the only way for me to stop you." The moment was tense, full of emotions neither of us had expected to feel, but I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't going to let their lies tear me apart. I had taken control, and now I was going to fight for everything I had worked for. I could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on me as I stood there, facing Emily and Chris, the people I had once trusted more than anyone. There was a strange stillness in the room, the kind that comes right before everything changes. Emily, who had once been my confidant and partner, now seemed like a stranger. Her eyes, which once held warmth and affection, were now filled with a mixture of defensiveness and fear. Chris, my business partner and brother-in-law, stood silently beside her, his arms crossed over his chest, as if he could somehow distance himself from the gravity of the moment. I wasn't sure what I had expected from this confrontation, maybe a moment of truth, some admission of guilt, or even some apology for the years of betrayal. But instead, there was only silence, broken by Emily's voice trembling in an attempt to maintain control. "Henry, you don't understand," she said, her voice unsteady but filled with an air of familiarity, the same voice she had used when she was trying to calm me down during disagreements. But this time I wasn't having it. My eyes didn't soften, and my stance didn't waver. "I understand perfectly, Emily," I replied, my voice calm and unwavering. "You and Chris have been planning this for months. I overheard you two talking. I know all about your plans to take everything, our company, our house, everything I've built." Chris shifted uncomfortably beside her, his jaw tightening, but he didn't say a word. His silence spoke volumes. I could see the guilt in his eyes, the realization that he was caught in a trap of his own making. He had been complicit in everything, helping his sister manipulate me, all while I had trusted him as a business partner for years. This wasn't just about the betrayal of a wife anymore. It was the betrayal of a family. Emily took a step forward, but her confidence was slipping. "Henry," she said, her voice quiet, but with a hint of exasperation, "I'm doing what I have to do. We haven't been happy for years. You've been so consumed with work that you never noticed. Chris and we're doing this for a future. You've always been so focused on building your empire, but what about me? What about our happiness?" Her words were meant to sting, to make me feel guilty, to make me question everything I thought I knew. But instead, they only confirmed my worst fears. The woman I had trusted had been planning my downfall all along. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't remorseful. She was justifying her actions. "You really think this is about happiness?" I shot back, anger rising but controlled. "This isn't about happiness, Emily. This is about greed. You and Chris have been planning to steal everything from me, and you think I'll just hand it over?" I could see her eyes flicker with something like shame for a brief moment, but then it was replaced by defiance. "I don't expect you to hand anything over, Henry. This was always about securing my future. You don't understand what it's been like. I've supported you for years, but you've never supported me. You're too focused on your work, your projects, your next deal." Her words, sharp and venomous, felt like a slap across my face. I had been consumed by work, yes, but I had done it to build a better life for all of us. I had made sacrifices, worked long hours to make sure we had everything we needed. And this was how it ended. I took a deep breath, trying to maintain control. "You want to talk about sacrifice, Emily? I sacrificed my time with you, with our kids, for this family. I worked day and night to build this company, to create a life we could all be proud of. And you? You've been planning behind my back. You've been pretending to love me, while plotting to destroy everything I've worked for." Her face hardened. The tears that had started to form in her eyes quickly wiped away. "You don't get it, Henry," she said, her voice taking on a steely edge. "I was stuck. I had no choice. I needed something more than just your money. I needed a life of my own. A life where I wasn't just the wife of the man who built everything, but had no part in it." I could hardly believe what I was hearing. Emily had always been part of my life, my partner in everything. But now, it was clear she had never seen it that way. She had always been willing to use me, my success, to secure her own comfort, but never cared about the sacrifices I made. I turned to Chris, who had been quietly observing our exchange. "And you, Chris?" I asked, my voice colder than I felt. "You've been in on this from the beginning. How long have you been planning to take me down, huh? You've been my partner for over a decade, and you've been lying to my face this whole time." Chris didn't look me in the eye. His gaze dropped to the floor, and I could see the guilt written all over his face. I never meant for it to go this far," he stammered, finally breaking his silence. I thought I could help Emily. I didn't think it would turn into this." "Turn into what, Chris? A full-scale betrayal?" I was done pretending I didn't see it. I was done listening to their lies. "You helped her plan this. You thought I wouldn't find out. You thought you could just take everything from me, and I wouldn't fight back." I could see the tension in Chris's face. He looked like a man cornered, like he knew he had crossed a line he couldn't come back from. But it didn't matter anymore. This wasn't about family loyalty anymore. This was about protecting everything I had built. I turned back to Emily, who stood silently watching me. "I've got everything I need," I said, pulling out the files from the bag I had been carrying. "The bank records, the recordings, the photos. I'm not going to let you get away with this. I'm going to make sure you don't take a single thing from me." Emily's face went pale as I laid the evidence out on the coffee table between us. The recordings of their conversation, the photos of their meetings, everything. The lies, the manipulation, it was all there. Chris's face flushed red with embarrassment. This was never supposed to happen," he muttered, his voice shaking. "Well, it's happening now," I replied coldly, "and you can't take it back." The moment hung in the air, thick with tension. It felt like the ground beneath me had shifted, like everything I thought I knew had collapsed. But one thing was certain. I wasn't going to let Emily and Chris destroy me. I would fight for my business, my future, and my children, and I would make sure they faced the consequences of their betrayal. The battle was just beginning, but I was ready. I could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on me as I stood there, facing Emily and Chris, the people I had once trusted more than anyone. There was a strange stillness in the room, the kind that comes right before everything changes. Emily, who had once been my confidante and partner, now seemed like a stranger. Her eyes, which once held warmth and affection, were now filled with a mixture of defensiveness and fear. Chris, my business partner and brother-in-law, stood silently beside her, his arms crossed over his chest, as if he could somehow distance himself from the gravity of the moment. I wasn't sure what I had expected from this confrontation. Maybe a moment of truth, some admission of guilt, or even some apology for the years of betrayal. But instead, there was only silence, broken by Emily's voice trembling in an attempt to maintain control. "Henry, you don't understand," she said, her voice unsteady but filled with an air of familiarity, the same voice she had used when she was trying to calm me down during disagreements. But this time, I wasn't having it. My eyes didn't soften, and my stance didn't waver. "I understand perfectly, Emily," I replied, my voice calm and unwavering. "You and Chris have been planning this for months. I overheard you two talking. I know all about your plans to take everything. Our company, our house, everything I've built." Chris shifted uncomfortably beside her, his jaw tightening, but he didn't say a word. His silence spoke volumes. I could see the guilt in his eyes, the realization that he was caught in a trap of his own making. He had been complicit in everything, helping his sister manipulate me, all while I had trusted him as a business partner for years. This wasn't just about the betrayal of a wife anymore. It was the betrayal of a family. Emily took a step forward, but her confidence was slipping. "Henry," she said, her voice quiet but with a hint of exasperation, "I'm doing what I have to do. We haven't been happy for years. You've been so consumed with work that you never noticed. Chris and we're doing this for a future. You've always been so focused on building your empire, but what about me? What about our happiness?" Her words were meant to sting, to make me feel guilty, to make me question everything I thought I knew. But instead, they only confirmed my worst fears. The woman I had trusted had been planning my downfall all along. She wasn't sorry, she wasn't remorseful, she was justifying her actions. "You really think this is about happiness?" I shot back, anger rising, but controlled. "This isn't about happiness, Emily. This is about greed. You and Chris have been planning to steal everything from me, and you think I'll just hand it over?" I could see her eyes flicker with something like shame for a brief moment, but then it was replaced by defiance. "I don't expect you to hand anything over, Henry. This was always about securing my future. You don't understand what it's been like. I've supported you for years, but you've never supported me. You're too focused on your work, your projects, your next deal." Her words, sharp and venomous, felt like a slap across my face. I had been consumed by work, yes, but I had done it to build a better life for all of us. I had made sacrifices, worked long hours to make sure we had everything we needed. And this was how it ended? I took a deep breath, trying to maintain control. "You want to talk about sacrifice, Emily? I sacrificed my time with you, with our kids, for this family. I worked day and night to build this company, to create a life we could all be proud of. And you? You've been planning behind my back. You've been pretending to love me, while plotting to destroy everything I've worked for." Her face hardened, the tears that had started to form in her eyes quickly wiped away. "You don't get it, Henry," she said, her voice taking on a steely edge. I was stuck. I had no choice. I needed something more than just your money. I needed a life of my own. A life where I wasn't just the wife of the man who built everything, but had no part in it. I could hardly believe what I was hearing. Emily had always been part of my life, my partner in everything. But now it was clear she had never seen it that way. She had always been willing to use me, my success, to secure her own comfort, but never cared about the sacrifices I made. I turned to Chris, who had been quietly observing our exchange. "And you, Chris?" I asked, my voice colder than I felt. "You've been in on this from the beginning. How long have you been planning to take me down, huh? You've been my partner for over a decade, and you've been lying to my face this whole time." Chris didn't look me in the eye. His gaze dropped to the floor, and I could see the guilt written all over his face. I never meant for it to go this far," he stammered, finally breaking his silence. I thought I could help Emily. I didn't think it would turn into this." "Turn into what, Chris?" "A full-scale betrayal?" I was done pretending I didn't see it. I was done listening to their lies. "You thought I wouldn't find out. You thought you could just take everything from me and I wouldn't fight back." I could see the tension in Chris's face. He looked like a man cornered, like he knew he had crossed a line he couldn't come back from. But it didn't matter anymore. This wasn't about family loyalty anymore. This was about protecting everything I had built. I turned back to Emily, who stood silently watching me. "I've got everything I need," I said, pulling out the files from the bag I had been carrying. "The bank records, the recordings, the photos. I'm not going to let you get away with this. I'm going to make sure you don't take a single thing from me." Emily's face went pale as I laid the evidence out on the coffee table between us. The recordings of their conversation, the photos of their meetings, everything. The lies, the manipulation. It was all there. Chris's face flushed red with embarrassment. This was never supposed to happen," he muttered, his voice shaking. "Well, it's happening now," I replied coldly, "and you can't take it back." The moment hung in the air, thick with tension. It felt like the ground beneath me had shifted, like everything I thought I knew had collapsed. But one thing was certain. I wasn't going to let Emily and Chris destroy me. I would fight for my business, my future, and my children, and I would make sure they faced the consequences of their betrayal. The battle was just beginning, but I was ready. The hearing was just the beginning. But as I left the courthouse that afternoon, I felt the first stirrings of hope. I was no longer at their mercy. The truth was on my side, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was in control. I had a long road ahead, but I was ready. This fight was far from over, but I was prepared for whatever came next. The days following the court hearing were a blur. I spent my mornings at the office, my mind constantly preoccupied with the battle I was fighting at home, and my evenings poring over legal documents with Jack. The weight of the situation pressed down on me. Every decision, every move I made had to be calculated. This wasn't just a matter of business or assets anymore. It was about protecting my family's future, about ensuring that Emily and Chris didn't get away with their betrayal. But as I sat in the office late one night, reviewing the latest reports from Mike, my private investigator, something in me shifted. I wasn't just surviving this anymore. I was ready to take control. It had been 2 weeks since I filed for divorce, and the media was beginning to pick up on the story. A prominent businessman fighting a bitter divorce, with allegations of financial manipulation and asset theft. It was the kind of story that drew attention. Emily hadn't expected the public spotlight. She thought she could hide behind her carefully crafted image of the devoted wife, the mother, the successful lawyer. But the truth was slipping through the cracks. Every article that ran about the case painted her as the villain, not the victim she wanted to be seen as. I wasn't sure if that was the punishment I wanted for her, but it certainly made her nervous. The more public pressure she felt, the more erratic her actions became. And that was exactly what I needed. Every mistake, every inconsistency would give me more ammunition for the courtroom. One afternoon, after a particularly difficult meeting with my accountant, I decided to take a walk. I didn't want to be cooped up in the office anymore. I needed to clear my mind. As I strolled down the street, I couldn't help but feel the heaviness of everything weighing down on me. This wasn't just a fight for money or assets. This was a fight for dignity, for the years I had lost, for the trust that had been shattered. It was also about the legacy I was leaving for Sophie and Noah. I couldn't let their perception of me be tainted by the lies Emily had spun. That evening when I got home, I found an unexpected message waiting for me. It was from Sophie. "Dad, we need to talk. Can I come by tonight?" I knew her well enough to recognize the concern in her words. She had been through enough already. I could hear the tension in her voice, even through a simple text message. When she arrived, I could see the worry etched into her face. She sat down across from me at the kitchen table, her hands clasped in her lap, a sign that she was preparing for something difficult. "Dad, I've been talking to some people," Sophie began, her voice steady but tinged with uncertainty. "I've been talking to a therapist at school about all this. With everything that's been happening, it's hard to process. But I need to know. What's going on with Mom and Chris? Why did they do this?" I took a deep breath and leaned back in my chair. I had never wanted Sophie to be caught in the middle of all of this. It broke my heart to see her struggling, trying to understand the mess we were all in. But I knew that keeping the truth from her wasn't an option anymore. "Sophie," I started, my voice soft, "your mom and Chris have been plotting to take everything. They've been planning to divorce me and take the business, the house, everything. They've been working behind my back for months, using everything they could to try to gain control, and I'm not going to let them." Her eyes widened, a mix of disbelief and sorrow crossing her face. "So, they're doing this because they want money? Because of the company?" "Yeah," I said, nodding slowly. "It's about money. It's about control. Your mom wanted a life of her own, and I guess she thought that meant getting rid of me. But I'm not going down like this. I've worked too hard." Sophie was quiet for a moment, taking everything in. Then her voice broke the silence. "Dad, I don't know how to process all this. I never thought Mom could do something like this." "I didn't either," I admitted. "But this isn't about us, Sophie. It's about what they think they can get away with. I'm not letting them destroy everything we've worked for. You deserve better than that." Sophie's eyes softened and she reached across the table to take my hand. "I'm here for you, Dad. I'm not going to let them tear us apart." Her words were a small relief, like a lifeline in the storm. It was clear she had made her choice. She didn't want to take sides, but she was standing by me, and that was all I needed. As Sophie left that night, I realized that something had shifted in me too. This fight was no longer just about revenge or justice. It was about rebuilding, about showing my children that truth and integrity still mattered. It wasn't about tearing Emily down or getting even with Chris. It was about reclaiming my own life and showing them that I wasn't going to be anyone's fool anymore. The next few days were a blur of legal meetings, business calls, and more publicity around the case. Emily tried to spin the narrative, of course, trying to paint herself as the victim, but it was clear that she was losing control. The more she tried to manipulate the situation, the more the truth came out. Each time she made a move, I was right there, one step ahead. Then the unexpected happened. Chris reached out to me. It was a text message at first, then a phone call. He wanted to meet. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to let him stew in the mess he'd helped create. But another part of me wanted to hear what he had to say, to see if there was even a shred of remorse left in him. We met at a cafe downtown, far from the business meetings and courtroom dramas. Chris looked different, his usual confidence now replaced by an air of desperation. "I never meant for it to go this far," he said, his voice shaky. "I was trying to help Emily, but I've realized I've lost everything in the process. I've screwed up, Henry. I'm sorry." I studied him for a moment. The man who had once been like a brother to me, who I had trusted implicitly, was now a broken shell of the person I thought I knew. "You're sorry?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Sorry for what? For trying to take everything from me? For betraying your family?" He looked down at his coffee, unable to meet my gaze. "Yeah, I am. I can't undo it, but I can try to make it right." I shook my head. "You don't get to make it right, Chris. Not anymore. You chose your side. Now you deal with the consequences." I stood up, leaving him there, a man trapped by his own greed and lies. I wasn't interested in his apologies. The damage had been done, and the path forward was clear. As I walked out of the cafe, I knew the worst was yet to come. But I also knew that I wasn't alone in this fight. Sophie was standing by me, and I was determined to rebuild, piece by piece. Emily and Chris had made their choices, but I wasn't going to let them win. This was my fight, and I was ready. The days blurred together, each one bringing new challenges, new obstacles to navigate. The court case was moving forward, but so much of it felt like a slow, grinding battle. I was waiting for Emily and Chris to make their next move, waiting for them to react to the evidence I had gathered, waiting for them to try and maneuver their way out of the mess they had created. Every day felt like a chess match, and I wasn't about to let them checkmate me. The media circus surrounding my divorce was unavoidable. Every time I turned on the TV or checked my emails, there were headlines speculating about my company, my wealth, and the legal battles. Emily had managed to spin herself into the victim role, using the press to try to garner sympathy. But it was clear that the more she did it, the more she lost control of the narrative. I wasn't about to let her rewrite our history. She could play the part of the devastated wife all she wanted, but the truth was going to come out. Every conversation I had with my lawyer, Jack, revolved around strategy. We had already filed for a temporary restraining order on all assets, and we had managed to get the court to freeze the joint accounts. Emily had tried to access them several times, and each time the bank turned her away. It was satisfying, in a way, to know she was running out of ways to cover her tracks. But I couldn't afford to get complacent. I needed to stay 2 steps ahead. One evening, as I sat at my desk reviewing documents, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Mike, the private investigator. "Got some interesting intel on Chris," it read. I felt my pulse quicken. Mike had been keeping tabs on him, and his reports had been invaluable. Chris had been avoiding my calls, but I knew he wouldn't be able to hide forever. I opened the message to read the full report. "Chris is meeting with a new lawyer tomorrow. Looks like he's trying to get a jump on the case. He's also been making some large withdrawals from his personal account. There's talk of him trying to sell off assets." I put the phone down for a moment, processing the information. This was unexpected. Chris was trying to cover his tracks, trying to get ahead of the game by working with a new lawyer. It was clear he wasn't prepared to own up to what he had done. He was still trying to find a way out of the mess he had created. And those withdrawals, he was trying to move money around, maybe even set up some kind of escape plan. I immediately called Jack. "Chris is meeting with a new lawyer tomorrow," I said without preamble, "and he's making large withdrawals. We need to move quickly." "I'll take care of it," Jack replied, his voice steady. "I'll get a hold of the bank and make sure they freeze any accounts that haven't already been locked down. If Chris is moving money around, we need to stop it before he has a chance to do anything." I hung up, feeling a sense of urgency settle over me. This wasn't just a legal fight anymore. This was about keeping control of everything I had built. Chris was still trying to outmaneuver me, but I wasn't about to let him succeed. Not now, not after everything that had happened. The next day I headed into the office trying to keep my mind focused on work. But all I could think about was the next move, what Chris would do, what Emily would do. I had to prepare for whatever was coming. The pressure was mounting, but I couldn't let it break me. I had been through too much already. I wasn't going to lose now. Around noon, I got a call from Sophie. Her voice was softer than usual, like she was carefully choosing her words. "Dad, I've been thinking," she began, "and I just want to make sure you're okay. I know you're doing everything you can, but I'm worried. I don't want you to lose yourself in all this. You're not just fighting for the company or the house, you're fighting for you too. I know it's hard, but you need to remember that we're here for you." I felt a lump form in my throat. Sophie had always been perceptive, always in tune with the emotional currents that ran through our family. She was right, of course. I had been so focused on the legal battle that I had forgotten about what mattered most: my family, my health, my sense of self. "Thank you, sweetheart," I said quietly, my voice breaking a little. "I'm trying, I really am. But this isn't just about the company anymore. This is about showing them that I won't let them take everything from me. Not my life, not my kids, not the future we were supposed to have." She was silent for a moment, then replied, "I know, Dad, but don't let them win by taking your peace away. You don't need to fight this alone. You've got me, you've got Noah, and you've got Jack, but you've also got yourself. Remember that." Her words struck a chord deep inside me. I had been so caught up in the fight that I had started to lose sight of the bigger picture. This wasn't just about the assets. It was about my future, my freedom, and most importantly, my relationship with my kids. I wasn't going to let Emily and Chris drag me down any further. I had to keep my head above water, for them and for myself. After the call, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. It wasn't that the situation had magically gotten better, but Sophie's reminder gave me the clarity I needed. This fight wasn't just about revenge or justice anymore. It was about reclaiming control over my life, my business, and my peace of mind. I was stronger than Emily and Chris thought, and I was going to prove it. That evening I sat in my office, reviewing the latest developments and strategizing my next move. There was a lot left to do, but now I felt more focused, more prepared. Chris and Emily had made their choices, and now it was time for me to make mine. The fight was far from over, but I was no longer just reacting to their moves. I was taking control. And that was the first step toward winning. The days following the call with Sophie felt like a shift had occurred in me. I was no longer just a man reacting to betrayal. I was a man taking charge. It wasn't just about outsmarting Emily and Chris anymore. It was about reclaiming my peace of mind, my life, and everything I had fought for over the years. I had to stay strong, not just for me, but for Sophie, for Noah, for my entire future. It was a Monday afternoon when things really began to escalate. I had been in meetings all morning, finalizing a few real estate deals, when I received an unexpected phone call. It was from Mike, my private investigator. "I've got something you need to see," he said, his voice tense. "It's about Chris. He's doing something big. I'm heading to his office now, but you might want to prepare yourself." My stomach dropped. Every instinct in me screamed to act, to rush over there and confront Chris right then and there. But I knew I had to keep my head straight. This wasn't about a confrontation. It was about a strategic move, emotional control. I asked Mike to hold off on anything until I could get more details. As I hung up the phone, my mind raced through the possibilities. What was Chris up to? Had he already made his move? Was he trying to destroy me completely, or was he planning to strike a deal? I needed answers. After a few tense hours of waiting, Mike finally sent me the details. It turned out that Chris had been in contact with one of my key contractors, someone I had been working with for years on some of the largest projects in my company. The contractor had been offered an underground deal by Chris, an arrangement to undercut the prices of the ongoing projects in an attempt to siphon funds out of my business. I couldn't believe it. Chris wasn't just undermining me financially. He was sabotaging the company I had spent my entire adult life building. And the worst part? He was doing it from the inside, hiding behind a facade of concern while plotting against me. The sting of betrayal hit harder than it ever had before. He wasn't just my brother-in-law. He had been my partner, my ally in so many things. To think that he would resort to these dirty tricks to destroy me, it felt like the last vestige of family I had left had vanished. I took a deep breath and dialed Jack. This was beyond anything I had anticipated, and I knew we had to act quickly. The contractor needed to be protected. I couldn't afford to let Chris or anyone else have access to my business finances anymore. Not a single penny could be moved without my knowledge. Jack answered after the second ring. "Henry, I'm on it. We'll need to move fast. We'll freeze everything, prevent Chris from making any unauthorized withdrawals. We'll subpoena records, get everything we need to hit him where it hurts." I felt the weight of the situation start to settle in. This wasn't just a legal battle anymore. It was a full-scale war. Chris had crossed a line, and I was no longer just trying to salvage my business. I was trying to protect everything I had worked for. My name, my reputation, my legacy. "Do whatever it takes," I said firmly, determination in my voice. "I want Chris stopped, and I want Emily to know what's happening. She needs to understand what her brother has done." The next few days were a blur. The legal filings, the paperwork, the phone calls, it all piled on top of me. But I kept moving forward, my focus razor sharp. I couldn't afford to lose control now. Emily and Chris had taken too much from me already, and I wasn't going to let them take any more. I wasn't just fighting for my company. I was fighting for my dignity, my family's future, and my peace. By Friday, we had hit Chris with everything we had. Jack had managed to get a temporary restraining order filed against Chris and had successfully frozen his access to my company's accounts. Chris would be unable to make any moves without attracting legal scrutiny. I didn't expect him to go down without a fight, but I knew this was a crucial step in turning the tables. But that night, as I sat alone in my office reviewing the final details of the filing, the phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but something in my gut told me it was important. I picked up on the first ring. "Henry?" The voice on the other end was familiar, but the tone was unexpected, desperate, almost pleading. It was Emily. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep the edge out of my voice. I had no idea what game she was playing now, but I wasn't in the mood for her manipulations. "Henry, please," she said quickly. "I need to talk to you. I didn't know what Chris was doing. I swear I didn't. He's gone off the rails. You have to understand, this is all it's all gotten out of hand." I could hear the panic in her voice, but it didn't move me. I wasn't interested in her excuses anymore. You think I'm going to believe you? After everything you've done? After everything Chris has done? I know you're angry, but please, listen to me. I'm not trying to take the company or the house or any of it. I just want it out. But now Chris is making everything worse. He's getting himself in deeper. And Henry, I never wanted this to go this far. The vulnerability in her voice made me pause, but only for a moment. It was the same act she had pulled 100 times before. Emily wasn't some helpless woman. She was a calculated force. She knew exactly what she was doing, and it wasn't about making things better for anyone but herself. This wasn't about us anymore. It was about her ambition and her need to protect her future, regardless of the cost to anyone else. I don't want to hear it, Emily, I said, my voice steady. What you and Chris did isn't just a mistake. It's betrayal, and I'm not going to let you get away with it. There was silence on the other end. And then, just before I hung up, I heard her voice, small, almost broken. I never meant for it to end this way, Henry, but I guess we're both too far gone now. She hung up, and I sat there for a moment, staring at the phone in my hand. I had been right all along. Emily wasn't the person I had once thought she was, and now she had sealed her fate. There was no going back. The battle was far from over, but I knew something for sure now. I was in control, and no one, not even Emily or Chris, was going to take that away from me. The weeks following my last conversation with Emily felt like an endless waiting game. Every move I made was carefully calculated, every step taken with precision. I was no longer just protecting my company. I was protecting the life I had built, the future I had hoped for. The legal battle was in full swing, but I had the advantage now. Emily and Chris had overplayed their hand, and their attempts to undermine me only seemed to tighten the noose around their necks. The court hearings had become more intense, the public attention growing with each passing day. Every time a headline appeared with Emily's name, I could see the cracks in her carefully constructed image. She was trying to play the victim, trying to rewrite our history. But I had the facts. I had the evidence. I wasn't going to let her manipulate the situation anymore. But just when I thought I had everything under control, something unexpected happened. A letter arrived at my office one Monday morning. It was from Chris's new lawyer. My heart sank as I read the contents. Chris was claiming that I had been fraudulent in my dealings with the company, attempting to hide assets and misappropriate funds. He was demanding a full investigation into my business practices and accusing me of hiding information during the divorce proceedings. It was an audacious move, one I wasn't prepared for, and it hit me harder than I expected. The letter was a clear attempt to shift the blame onto me, to make me out to be the villain. Chris was playing a dangerous game, trying to make me appear as the manipulator in the eyes of the court, in the eyes of the public. The accusations were baseless, but they were enough to throw a wrench in my plan. It was a strategic move, a last-ditch effort to take me down before I could finish what I started. I sat at my desk, the letter in front of me, trying to keep my emotions in check. This wasn't just about defending my reputation anymore, it was about surviving. Chris knew he was losing. He knew the walls were closing in. And now, he was trying to create a diversion, trying to make it seem like I was the one who had something to hide. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to focus. I had spent my life building this company, building my reputation. I wasn't about to let some last-minute accusations tear it all down. I needed to act quickly, but I had to be careful. If I made the wrong move, it could look like I was panicking. I couldn't afford that. I immediately called Jack. "Jack, we've got a problem," I said, trying to keep the edge out of my voice. "Chris's lawyer has filed for an investigation into my business practices. They're accusing me of fraud." There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could hear Jack's sharp intake of breath. "I figured it was coming," he said finally. "But this is more serious than I thought. They're desperate, Henry. This could derail everything." "I'm not going to let it," I replied firmly. "We need to respond fast. I've got all the documentation we need to prove their claims are false, but I need you to prepare a counterclaim. We can't let them take control of the narrative." Jack agreed, and we quickly set up a plan of action. Mike continued to gather intel on Chris's lawyer and any movements they were making behind the scenes. Meanwhile, I spent my days in the office, combing through my company's financial records with Jack, ensuring that every transaction was documented, every asset accounted for. I knew there could be no mistakes, no room for doubt. I needed to show the court that I had nothing to hide. The next few days were a blur of meetings and phone calls. The pressure was mounting, but I couldn't afford to crack. I knew Emily and Chris were watching, waiting for me to make a mistake, but I wasn't going to give them that satisfaction. I had been pushed to the brink, but now I was stronger than ever. Then came the day of the hearing, the moment of truth. The tension was palpable as I walked into the courtroom, my heart pounding in my chest. Emily and Chris sat across the room, their faces full of confidence, but I could see the cracks beginning to show. They had pushed too far, and now they were trying to cover their tracks. But I had the evidence. I had the truth. The judge called the session to order, and the proceedings began. Chris's lawyer stood up first, presenting their claims of fraud and misconduct. They painted a picture of me as a businessman, desperate to hide assets, someone who had built an empire on lies. The accusations felt like a punch to the gut, but I kept my composure, focusing on the task at hand. When it was my turn to speak, I rose from my seat and walked to the stand. The weight of the moment pressed down on me, but I didn't let it show. I had proof, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me. I calmly explained the details of my business practices, the transparency I had maintained throughout the years, and the clear documentation I had prepared for the court. I presented my financial records, the contracts, the transactions, and every piece of evidence that disproved their claims. The more I spoke, the more I could see the doubt in the lawyers' eyes. They had no case. The turning point came when I introduced the recordings of Emily and Chris's conversations. I could see the shift in the room as the evidence sank in. Their smug expressions faltered, and for the first time it felt like I had the upper hand. As I finished presenting the evidence, I turned to face the judge. "Your Honor," I said, my voice steady, "I have been nothing but transparent throughout this entire process. These accusations are nothing more than a last-ditch effort by the opposing side to tarnish my name and destroy my business. I have nothing to hide." The judge nodded, and for a moment the courtroom was silent. It was clear that the tide had shifted. Chris and Emily's plan had fallen apart. They had made the mistake of underestimating me, of thinking that they could manipulate the system and get away with it. But they were wrong. When the session adjourned, I left the courtroom with a sense of vindication. The legal battle wasn't over, but I had made my move. I had exposed the truth, and now it was only a matter of time before the rest of the world saw it too. That night, I went home and sat in the quiet of my office, reflecting on everything that had happened. Emily and Chris had tried to take everything from me, but they had underestimated my strength. I had fought for what was mine, and now I could see the light at the end of the tunnel. The battle was far from over, but I had won this round, and that was enough to keep me going. The days after the courtroom victory felt strangely quiet, like the calm after a storm. For a moment I allowed myself to believe that the worst was behind me. The pressure from Emily and Chris had reached a breaking point, and I had come out on top. But as the reality of the situation settled in, I realized that the fight was far from over. The legal battles would continue, but something had changed within me. I wasn't just fighting to defend myself anymore. I was fighting for my future, for everything I had built, and for the peace I knew I deserved. I spent the next few days revisiting the evidence, making sure everything was in place. Jack was handling the legal side of things, but I knew that Emily and Chris wouldn't let go without a fight. They had already tried to undermine me in every possible way, and I knew they wouldn't back down just because of a setback. It wasn't just about winning the court case anymore. It was about securing my peace and making sure that my business, my life, wasn't something they could destroy so easily. I remember one morning when I sat down with Sophie in the kitchen. It was one of those rare moments where the world seemed to pause, and we could simply exist without the weight of everything pressing down on us. Sophie had been a constant support for me throughout this whole ordeal, and it was clear that she was processing everything in her own way. "Dad," she said, looking at me seriously, "I know you're fighting for what's right, but are you okay? Really?" The question caught me off guard. I had been so focused on keeping everything together that I hadn't really stopped to think about how I was doing. Sophie, with her sharp insight, could see through me better than anyone else. "I'm fine," I said, trying to sound reassuring. "I'm just focused on making sure this is all over. I don't want to keep fighting forever, but I can't let them walk away with everything." She nodded, but I could see the concern in her eyes. Sophie wasn't just worried about the case, she was worried about me. I had been so focused on the battle that I had neglected to check in with myself. I realized in that moment how much I had been sacrificing for this fight. "I know, Dad," she said quietly. "But you've always taught me that there's more to life than just winning. It's about who you are when you get through it all." Her words hung in the air, and for the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to really hear them. Sophie was right. I had been so consumed with defending my reputation and securing my business that I had lost sight of what mattered most: myself, my health, and my connection with my family. I had been so focused on winning that I had almost forgotten how to live. The next few days were a turning point for me. I had been fighting for control, for justice, but in the process I had forgotten to take care of the things that mattered most. I took a step back. The fight would go on, but it didn't have to consume every part of me. I needed to rediscover balance between the battle and my peace of mind. The legal proceedings continued, and with every step I was more resolute. I wasn't about to let Emily or Chris destroy everything I had built. But I started making more time for myself, for my family. I took walks through the city in the evenings, just to clear my mind. I began spending more time with Noah, taking him to games, talking with him about life, and showing him the importance of keeping your integrity, no matter how hard things get. I even found the time to go to the gym, something I hadn't done regularly since all this started. Emily tried her best to spin things in her favor. She attacked my character through the press, but the more she did, the more it became clear to everyone that she had lost control of the narrative. Her attempts to manipulate the media only backfired. People saw through her lies. And as for Chris, his credibility continued to crumble under the weight of his own actions. I kept hearing more stories about how he was trying to cover his tracks, his business relationships falling apart. The pieces were slowly coming together, and it was clear that the truth was on my side. Then, one day, I received a call from Jack. His voice was more grave than usual, and I knew something was up. "Henry," he said, "we've got a new development. Emily and Chris are trying to take this to the next level. They're filing a counterclaim, accusing you of emotional abuse. They're trying to drag your reputation through the mud again." I was stunned. Emotional abuse? After everything they had done, this was the card they were playing now? I could feel my frustration rising, but I quickly reminded myself that this was just another desperate attempt on their part. They were trying to turn the tables, make me look like the villain when all they had done was lie, manipulate, and scheme. "This isn't going to work, Jack," I said, my voice firm. "We've got the evidence to prove it. They can't keep making baseless accusations. They can't keep trying to destroy me." "I know, Henry," Jack said, "but this is going to get ugly. They're pulling out all the stops." I knew it was coming. I had expected them to fight dirty, but this was a new low. Emily and Chris had both crossed lines that couldn't be uncrossed. They had shown their true colors, and now they were trying to manipulate the system one last time. But I was ready. I had everything I needed to prove my innocence. The evidence, the recordings, the financial records, everything was in place. I wasn't going to let their lies win. It was time for me to stand firm and expose the truth once and for all. I called Sophie that night. She had been there for me throughout this entire ordeal, and I knew she deserved to know what was coming. "Sophie," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "they're going to try to accuse me of things I haven't done. It's going to get ugly, but I'm not backing down. I need you to know that." Her voice was quiet but filled with strength. "I know, Dad, and I know you'll get through it. You always do." I didn't have all the answers, and I didn't know what the future held, but in that moment I knew one thing for sure: I was stronger than they thought. The truth was on my side, and no matter what they threw at me, I was going to stand tall. This battle wasn't over, But I was ready to fight for my future, for my peace, for my family. And this time I wouldn't let them win. The journey I had been on felt like a battle that would never end. Every step had been fraught with betrayal, manipulation, and countless moments of doubt. But as the months passed, something within me shifted. What had started as a fight for my business, my reputation, and my assets had slowly transformed into something deeper, into a fight for my peace of mind, my integrity, and my relationship with the people I loved. As I stood there in the courtroom, facing the final stages of this long, drawn-out war, I realized that this wasn't just about winning anymore. Yes, Emily and Chris had attempted to take everything from me, my company, my home, the life I had worked so hard to build. But what they hadn't anticipated was my strength and my ability to stay true to myself despite everything they threw at me. The more they tried to drag me through the mud, the more I had fought back, not with anger, but with resolve and clarity. I had always believed that the truth would prevail in the end. I had told myself that if I just held on, if I just kept going, the lies would crumble under the weight of evidence. And eventually, that was exactly what happened. The courtroom was quiet as the judge reviewed the final evidence, and as I sat there, the gravity of it all finally hit me. Emily's manipulations were exposed for what they were, a desperate attempt to take something that didn't belong to her. Chris's complicity was laid bare, revealing the greed and betrayal that had festered behind closed doors for far too long. The final ruling came swiftly. The counterclaims Chris and Emily had filed were thrown out of court. There was no evidence to support their accusations. My reputation was restored and my business was safe. The judge ruled in my favor on every count, awarding me full control of the company, the assets, and most importantly, the future that had once seemed uncertain. It felt like a weight had been lifted, but not in the way I expected. I wasn't elated. I wasn't jumping for joy. I felt a quiet satisfaction, a deep sense of relief that the truth had been upheld and that I could finally move forward. In the weeks that followed, I found myself recalibrating my life. I had spent so much time protecting what I thought was mine, my business, my money, my image, but I had neglected the most important part of myself. In the midst of the chaos, I had forgotten to take care of my well-being, my relationships, and my peace of mind. It took a few conversations with Sophie and Noah, a few long walks and quiet evenings at home, to realize that my real victory was not just in the courtroom, but in reclaiming the parts of me that had been lost during the fight. Sophie's support had been invaluable throughout this whole ordeal. She had reminded me time and time again that my worth wasn't tied to what I owned or the battles I fought. She had shown me that strength wasn't about winning, it was about staying true to who you were, even in the face of betrayal. In the end, that was what truly mattered. I realized that my success had never been about money or power, but about the life I had built and the people I had chosen to surround myself with. Emily, once a central part of my life, had lost everything in the end. She had sought to tear down the very things I had spent years building, but it was her own actions that led to her downfall. The media that had once painted her as the innocent victim was now exposing her true nature, manipulative, deceitful, and self-serving. She was left with nothing but the consequences of her own decisions. Chris, too, had fallen from grace. His once promising legal career was ruined, his reputation in tatters. The price of betrayal had been steep for both of them. As for me, I didn't feel any sense of vindication. There was no joy in seeing them fall apart. Instead, there was a quiet sense of closure. I had learned that no amount of money, no amount of success could ever make up for the things I had lost along the way. But I had also learned that I was stronger than I thought. I had survived the worst, and I had come out on the other side not broken, but redefined. The business had survived, and I had rebuilt it, not just as a company, but as a reflection of everything I had learned. I had learned that no matter how hard you fight, sometimes you have to let go of the things that weigh you down. In the end, it wasn't the battle for control that mattered most. It was the ability to rise above it, to live with integrity and authenticity, even when the world around you tries to tear you apart. As I looked out the window of my office one evening, watching the sunset over the city, I finally felt a sense of peace settle in. It had been a long journey, one that had taken me to the edge and back. But I had found my way through the storm, and I knew now that the future was mine to shape. Truth, resilience, and honor had won, and that was all I needed. In life, you will inevitably face moments of betrayal, challenge, and loss, but it's important to remember that strength doesn't come from avoiding these struggles, it comes from how you respond. When life feels overwhelming, take a step back and assess what truly matters. Don't get lost in the fight for material things or the pursuit of winning at all costs. Integrity and authenticity are far more valuable in the long run. Stay true to yourself, even when others try to manipulate or undermine you. Focus on the relationships that matter and protect your peace of mind above all else. Stand firm in your beliefs and decisions, but also learn to let go of what you can't control. Life will throw obstacles in your path, but your reaction to those challenges defines your future. Don't let betrayal or hardship define you. Let them be stepping stones that teach you valuable lessons. Seek balance between ambition and peace, and understand that no material possession or victory will ever replace the value of love, honesty, and self-respect. The fight for success is important, but the journey towards personal growth and inner peace is what ultimately makes life worth living.